The aliens had always prided themselves on being the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their warriors trained from birth to master physical combat, mental fortitude, and strategic brilliance. The challenge they had designed was the ultimate test of all these attributes, a trial so impossible that no species outside their own had ever completed it. The test wasn't just a display of power, it was a reminder to all other races of their superiority. Only those born into their society, shaped by their relentless pursuit of perfection, could possibly hope to survive the grueling gauntlet they had built. For decades, alien species had sent their best soldiers to this test, hoping to prove themselves worthy. Yet, one after another they failed. Their best minds broken by the relentless challenges, their bodies succumbing to the unforgiving terrain, and their spirits crushed by the overwhelming complexity of the obstacles. To the aliens, these failures confirmed a universal truth: they were untouchable, the undisputed masters of all things war. So, when the humans arrived, the aliens greeted them with amused contempt. The human Marines were not the first to take the challenge, but they were the most peculiar. Ordinary in appearance compared to the towering, biologically enhanced soldiers of the alien elite, these Marines were shorter, less physically imposing, and lacked the obvious signs of genetic modification that the aliens deemed necessary for true strength. They wore standard-issue combat suits, no elaborate enhancements, and their weapons, by alien standards, seemed basic. Their leader, a grizzled Marine commander with a hardened expression, scanned the alien test site with a quiet calm that belied the challenge before them. The alien spectators, gathered to witness yet another inevitable failure, whispered among themselves. "What hope do they have?" one alien scoffed. "They're only human," said another, watching with smug disdain. Among them stood their finest warriors, towering over the humans and exuding confidence, their faces devoid of concern. They had faced this test themselves and passed with ease. To them, the idea that humans, small, unmodified, and unremarkable, could even comprehend the difficulty of the test was laughable. But the humans did not waver. As the rules of the test were explained, detailing the insurmountable obstacles, the psychological trials, and the life-threatening traps, the Marines remained stoic. It wasn't arrogance that kept them steady. It was something else, something deeper, an understanding of who they were and what they had overcome in the past. They had fought on countless worlds, endured unimaginable conditions, and faced enemies just as technologically superior as these aliens claimed to be. And every time, they had adapted. Every time, they had survived. The test itself was a masterpiece of alien engineering, designed to exploit every possible weakness. The environment was a hostile alien landscape, with temperatures fluctuating from freezing cold to blistering heat within hours. The air was thin, barely breathable, and the gravity shifted unpredictably, forcing the competitors to constantly adjust their balance. Advanced drones patrolled the area, armed with weapons that could track heat signatures and detect the slightest movement. And then there were the mental challenges, hallucinatory traps designed to break even the strongest minds, to twist reality and shatter confidence. As the Marines prepared, the alien overseers began to place bets on how quickly the humans would fail. "I give them an hour," one alien commander said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Their minds won't last long against the illusions. They'll be begging for mercy before they even reach the first checkpoint." His companions chuckled in agreement, their sharp, metallic laughter echoing through the arena. The human commander, standing with his team just outside the entrance to the testing grounds, surveyed the aliens without a word. He didn't need to respond. He had seen this kind of arrogance before, in enemies who believed that strength was solely defined by physical might or technological advancement. He knew better. He knew that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their bodies. It was in their will, in their ability to push through when every other species would surrender. The Marines moved in unison, their camaraderie built from years of training and countless battles. There was no need for elaborate speeches or reassurances. Each of them knew what was at stake, and each of them trusted the person standing beside them. They had fought through hell before, and they would do it again now. As they entered the arena, the air around them seemed to shift. The landscape ahead was nothing short of a nightmare, a desolate wasteland filled with towering obstacles, shifting sands, and a sky that twisted unnaturally above them. In the distance, they could see the checkpoints they had to reach, each one more daunting than the last. And yet, there was no hesitation. The Marines advanced with quiet determination, their eyes fixed on the task ahead. In the control room above, the alien overseers watched, their expressions betraying mild curiosity. They had seen many attempts at the test, and none had ever come close to succeeding. To them, the humans were just another species overestimating their capabilities. But as the Marines began to move through the first phase, something changed. They didn't rush forward recklessly, nor did they falter in confusion at the shifting landscape. Instead, they moved with purpose, quickly adapting to the environment and using their surroundings to their advantage. Where other species had stumbled, the Marines found their footing. Where others had panicked, they stayed calm. The aliens began to shift in their seats, their earlier amusement replaced by uncertainty. They had expected failure, but the humans showed no signs of slowing down. The Marines were not just surviving, they were thriving in a test designed to break the unbreakable. As the first hour passed, the alien commander who had made the bet stared in disbelief. "How?" he muttered to himself, watching as the humans continued to push forward. He had never seen anything like it. There was no fear in their eyes, no hesitation in their movements. It was as if they had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. And perhaps, in a way, they had. The alien landscape was unlike anything the Marines had encountered before. The ground beneath them seemed alive, shifting unpredictably, making each step treacherous. Jagged cliffs rose sharply on either side, and the air crackled with an almost imperceptible hum, an indication of the invisible energy barriers designed to disorient even the sharpest minds. The temperature fluctuated wildly, one moment blistering heat, the next bone-chilling cold. Each breath felt labored, the air thin, making even the act of moving forward an exercise in endurance. This was no ordinary test, it was a deliberate gauntlet, crafted by the aliens to challenge every conceivable human limitation. The initial phase of the test seemed straightforward enough to the alien spectators, an endurance march across a barren stretch of land. The aliens, with their superior physical conditioning, glided across it with ease, barely breaking a sweat. But the humans struggled at first. The sudden changes in gravity threw off their balance, and more than one Marine stumbled as they adjusted to the disorienting landscape. The aliens watching from above smirked, confident in the inevitable outcome. They had seen this before. Other species had faltered at this stage, undone by the harsh terrain alone, and the Marines, though disciplined, appeared no different at first. Doubt crept into the ranks. Some of the Marines, seasoned in combat but unfamiliar with such extreme conditions, exchanged glances. They were used to fighting enemies they could see, threats they could identify and eliminate. This was different, an enemy in the environment itself, one that could not be shot or outmaneuvered in the traditional sense. It was a test of patience, strategy, and endurance, and for a moment, the enormity of the challenge hung in the air like a tangible weight. But they weren't alone. Their commander, unshaken by the difficulties, signaled for a halt. He didn't need to speak much, his presence alone was enough to refocus the team. There were no complaints, no doubts voiced aloud. Instead, the Marines began to adapt. They slowed their pace, conserving energy, and began to use the landscape to their advantage. Where other species had tried to push through, the Marines took their time, analyzing each step, mapping the terrain in their minds, learning from each stumble rather than letting it break their momentum. The obstacles became more complex as they pushed deeper into the test grounds. Walls that appeared solid disintegrated upon touch, while others were illusions, concealing deadly drops into pits of razor-sharp crystals. Alien drones patrolled the skies, their sensors picking up the smallest movements, ready to strike at any moment. The Marines faced puzzles designed to confuse and mislead. A wrong answer, a wrong step, would mean failure. The aliens watching expected hesitation, missteps, the same mistakes they'd seen from other competitors. But the Marines had been here before, if not physically, then mentally. They were soldiers trained in improvisation, in thinking on their feet under the most intense pressure. Slowly, methodically, they began to crack the patterns. One Marine, eyes focused on a series of alien symbols, called out to another, piecing together fragments of a puzzle designed to break their minds. What had seemed random was now beginning to make sense. As they worked, the aliens watched with growing concern. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be faltering, not gaining momentum. And yet, despite the constant physical and mental strain, the Marines were adapting faster than the aliens had anticipated. The alien soldiers, who had breezed through the early stages, now looked on with something bordering on unease. The humans weren't just surviving, they were learning, adapting, outpacing expectations. The turning point came in the second phase of the test, a segment that demanded not just physical endurance, but emotional resilience. The aliens had designed this part to break the spirit of any competitor. Hallucinations filled the Marines' vision, phantoms of past battles, lost comrades, and fears long buried deep in their minds. For most species, this was where they faltered, overwhelmed by the psychological toll. The Marines hesitated at first, shaken by the vividness of the visions. But then, something changed. Instead of fighting the illusions, they accepted them. Memories of fallen brothers and sisters weren't sources of pain. They were reminders of why they fought, why they pushed forward even when everything seemed impossible. They leaned on each other, a silent but powerful camaraderie binding them together. One by one, they shook off the illusions, their minds too disciplined, too strong to break under the pressure. In the control room, the alien commanders were no longer smirking. They whispered among themselves, uneasy now. The humans were moving through the test with a precision and determination they hadn't predicted. The strategies the aliens had relied on for centuries were failing to slow them down. The final stretch of the test was a gauntlet of physical endurance. A climb up a nearly vertical, jagged mountain, under constant fire from drones. The Marines, battered but not broken, faced this last challenge with grim resolve. The alien warriors had already reached the top, their genetically enhanced bodies designed for this kind of feat, but the humans, without the benefit of biological enhancements, relied on something else, their teamwork. Where the alien soldiers had gone alone, each trying to prove their individual strength, the Marines worked together. They formed a chain, pulling each other up, offering hands when one faltered. They used the debris from the drones, turning the alien technology against them, forming shields to protect themselves as they ascended. The summit, once thought unreachable by any species other than the aliens, was within their grasp. And as they pulled themselves over the edge, there was no grand celebration, no cheers of victory. There was only a quiet sense of accomplishment, of a job well done, as they stood side by side, looking down at the arena below. In that moment, the alien spectators, silent now, understood what they had failed to see before. It wasn't brute strength or superior technology that had brought the humans to the top. It was something far more powerful, the unbreakable human spirit, the ability to adapt, to endure, to push beyond the limits that others had set for them. The test was over, but the real victory wasn't in their completion of the challenge. It was in the realization that humanity was far more capable, far more resilient, than any of them had ever imagined. The silence that followed the human Marines' victory was profound. The alien spectators, once filled with derision and certainty of the Marines' failure, now stood in stunned disbelief. They had watched as these seemingly inferior beings, those without the genetic enhancements or advanced technology of the galaxy's elite, accomplished what was thought to be impossible. The Marines had not just completed the test, they had conquered it, moving through challenges designed to crush the strongest minds and bodies with an unexpected mastery. For the alien soldiers, many of whom had completed the test themselves, this result was incomprehensible. How could such basic creatures succeed where so many others had failed? The alien commanders, who had orchestrated and overseen the test for centuries, exchanged uneasy glances. The humans had shown no outward signs of superiority, no overwhelming strength or advanced tactics, just a relentless will to keep going, even when logic dictated that they should have collapsed under the pressure. The disbelief among the aliens was palpable. Their entire worldview had been shaken. There was no avoiding it now, respect had to be given. Some of the alien warriors, once confident and dismissive, now regarded the humans with a grudging admiration. Others, still unable to fully comprehend what had just happened, muttered among themselves, seeking explanations where there were none. One alien commander, his face drawn tight with shock, could only shake his head. "Impossible," he whispered. But the proof was right in front of them. Humans, unmodified and underestimated, had done the impossible. For the Marines, the victory was felt differently. They had never entered the test to prove a point or to seek glory. Their success wasn't a triumph of pride, but of survival, discipline, and teamwork. As they regrouped after the test, there were no grand gestures or celebratory shouts. Instead, they stood together, exhausted but unified, their bond forged even stronger by the experience. Each Marine knew that they hadn't achieved this victory alone. It was their combined strength, their trust in one another, that had allowed them to overcome every obstacle. One of the Marines, wiping the sweat from his brow, glanced at his team with quiet gratitude. "We did it," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. There was no arrogance in his words, just a recognition of the shared struggle. They had faced the impossible together, relying on the very traits that had always defined them: perseverance, ingenuity, and camaraderie. Their commander, as always, remained silent but watchful. He knew the significance of this victory, but he also knew it wasn't an individual achievement. Each member of the team had contributed, each had fought their own battles within the larger test, and together they had emerged victorious. The commander gave a subtle nod to his team, a gesture of acknowledgement for what they had endured. There was no need for more. They had done what they came to do, and they had done it as a unit. The implications of their victory rippled beyond the test grounds. For centuries, humans had been seen as a developing race, not yet worthy of real consideration by the galaxy's dominant species. They were viewed as resourceful, perhaps, but limited by their biology and lack of advanced technology. But now, with this test complete, those perceptions were about to shift. The human Marines had just demonstrated that raw power and technology weren't the only measures of strength. Their victory was proof that humans were far more resilient and adaptable than the galaxy had given them credit for. In the days following the test, the galactic political and military communities buzzed with the news. Alien species who had once dismissed humanity as an afterthought were now forced to reconsider. How could they afford not to? A species that could succeed in such an impossible trial clearly had more to offer than anyone had anticipated. The test had been designed to break the spirit of all but the most superior beings, and yet the humans had emerged stronger, undaunted by the challenges set before them. This wasn't just a victory for the Marines, it was a statement to the galaxy that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The alien military elite, particularly those who had once scoffed at the idea of human Marines competing, now found themselves in a difficult position. They had underestimated humanity, and that mistake could no longer be ignored. Questions began to surface. What would happen if humans, with their unpredictable nature and relentless determination, were to become key players in future military alliances or conflicts? Could they rise even further, challenging the very structure of galactic power that had long been dominated by the more established races? Back on Earth, the news of the Marines' success was met with a quiet but palpable sense of pride. There was no need for grand announcements or public celebrations. Humanity had proven its worth in a way that words could not capture. The Marines' triumph was not just about completing a test, it was about redefining what humanity could achieve. They had shown that human strength was not measured in muscle or technology alone, but in the ability to endure, to adapt, and to push forward in the face of overwhelming odds. In the end, the Marines' victory became a symbol for all of humanity. It wasn't about dominance or conquest, it was about proving that, no matter the challenge, humans would always find a way to rise. The galaxy had seen them as fragile, short-lived beings who lacked the genetic advantages of other species. But the test had revealed something far more powerful than genetic superiority. It had revealed the indomitable human spirit. As the Marines prepared to return home, there was a sense of quiet fulfillment among them. They had faced an impossible challenge, and they had not only survived, but thrived. The bonds they had forged in the heat of that trial would last a lifetime, and the galaxy's perception of their species would be forever altered. Yet, for all the broader implications, the Marines carried with them a simple truth: they hadn't won for the galaxy's approval. They had won for each other, for the shared belief that, together, they could overcome anything. And perhaps, in that, lay the greatest victory of all.